If it happens to silver, even just a little bit, I think it's going to start feeding upon itself. Like if silver gets a bit of attention, just a bit of attention, then people
Yep.
start noticing that, hey, supply is limited. Hey, we've had deficits for a number of years. Hey, the price is probably cheap from an historical viewpoint. So if it starts running, I can't see what is going to stop it, especially if the banks are no longer able to supply the market. If they lose control over that mechanism,
Right. And it's a small market too.
yes, it's a tiny market. If they
Yeah,
lose control over that price suppression mechanism, then it has the potential to do things, to put Bitcoin to shame.
the silver market has been in a deficit for 4 years now, and this has set the stage for there to eventually be a supply issue for physical silver. Today, the stockpile is starting to dwindle in London. It was reported in December that the silver inventory in London fell by 23 million ounces and was near record lows. And this is going on while there is strong industrial demand for silver that has no end in sight. The solar industry, for example, now accounts for 16% of total silver demand, and that's up from just 6% in 2015, just 10 years ago. So the demand is there, but the market is being manipulated. Just as an example, it was reported that the silver market traded 292 million paper ounces yesterday, just yesterday alone. And for comparison, the annual mine supply is about 850 million ounces. Oren, what do you think about the silver deficit going forward? And what do you think about these manipulators? What could they possibly be thinking?
Yes, I'll begin by saying that there was a time in which I was following the futures market more closely, and I was, following the inventory at the warehouses of the COMEX and the LBMA. And I haven't been doing that lately because it feels to me to be a bit pointless. How should I say it? It is beginning to look like a futile exercise because the ability of the manipulators to control the price is obviously so great that I don't think it's really going to change until we get that physical shortage, that point in which they have to acknowledge that shortage by forcing people to settle their trades in cash. And once that happens, I'm assuming that you're going to see a huge jump in the price, if not the official price, then the actual price at your coin store. And then you'll simply know that the game is over. So what is the point of like following that rigged game if you know and you assume that it's going to end one day and you're just waiting for that day? Because as you said, the fundamentals haven't changed. There is a continuing deficit in silver. Demand outstrips supply each and every year, has been going on for 4 years in a row. If you include the ETFs, then it's even 6 years. And that brings me to the question you asked me earlier. The people who are in charge of that manipulation, what are they thinking? What exactly goes through their heads?
Yeah, how does this play out? How do they think this is going to end?
Well, if I'm trying to guess what's going through their head, I think that they are thinking that they're doing the right thing. Imagine,
They're the
just put
heroes.
yourself in their shoes for a second. If they work for a large bank or for the US government, and they must be thinking that they want to protect the dollar and they want to control inflation. And they are concerned that the rising price of gold and silver is indicating the amount of inflation, the true amount of inflation. If it's indicating the true expansion of the money supply, then by controlling the price of gold and silver, they can, as though, reduce those inflation expectations and give the dollar, extend the life of the US dollar. So, as though for them, this may sound like a good idea, like a good thing to do. So we think of them as villains. They may be thinking of themselves as heroes.
Right.
But the thing is that by postponing the inevitable, they are liable to make things much, much worse because manipulations can't last forever. By artificially manipulating the price of silver down, for instance, you are disincentivizing production and encouraging consumption. Yes, you are
Right. Absolutely.
of course, the miners don't have an incentive to develop new mines and increase the production. And the consumers, the industrial consumers, they don't have an incentive to reduce the amount of silver that they're using because the price is so cheap, they can use it very liberally and so, by manipulating the price down, you are creating the shortage, which eventually will end this manipulation because the manipulation can only carry on as long as there's at least the appearance of a normal, healthy delivery mechanism at the COMEX. So, to sum it up, I think they're cutting the branch on which they're sitting.
That's a good comparison. Absolutely.
Yes, as long as the branch holds on, it appears as though everything is fine. It's only the moment that that branch which they are cutting down, the moment that it breaks, then you realize what a huge mistake it was to undermine it in the first place.
Right, absolutely. And when this correction takes place, it's not going to be a fast recovery. It takes a long time to get a mining operation going. Um, when you look at what's going on over with the LBMA, it looks like the banksters in the US trying to cover their short positions. It doesn't make sense that they would want to be cautious and look into covering those short positions because there was a time when Nixon was in office when there was a 10% surcharge on everything coming into the US, including the precious metals. So there's a potential there. It could affect them.
Regarding covering their shorts, there's been an interesting tweet by Josh Philip Fair, who's the founder and CEO of Scottsdale Mint. And he tweeted recently that silver refineries in the US are backed up more than 3 months. They are processing so much material into COMEX good delivery bars that industrial consumption is having issues finding reasonably priced physical silver. In other words, what he's saying is that retail investors are giving up, that they are selling their silver back into the market, and that refineries are melting it down back to those large 1,000 ounce bars, those Comex good delivery bars, in order to replenish the warehouses of the Comex. And that's, of course, a sad thing. That's a bad thing. We were kind of hoping for the retail investor to hang in there as
Right.
long as, yeah, until we
So they
get
could benefit from it.
yeah, until we get to that final silver squeeze. But it appears that this is something which is acting against us. The fact that people are giving in and selling their silver back into the market. So that's one more thing that we need to take into account. As long as it's happening, this is as though postponing the day of reckoning. Now, I don't think it's going to change the fundamentals. I don't think there's enough silver in the hands of those investors to change what is bound to happen finally, but it could postpone the day.
Absolutely. And that is interesting that they have the availability to sell it to them. So they are looking to replenish their stockpiles. And you might almost see that as a stage in the eventual development that people kind of saw happening, because people would say, oh, they'll start melting down, coins and turning them into good delivery bars. And so, we're kind of there now.
I have to admit, there were analysts who kept arguing that the public holds huge amounts of silver and that if we ever get a deficit the public will answer that deficit by selling its silver back into the market. But I was hoping for that to be kind of a negligible phenomenon. I was hoping for the vast majority of investors to hang in there until at least the price of silver reaches a new all-time high. That hasn't even happened. People are probably pinched. People don't have money and people are probably forced to sell some of their silver. And I also think that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have something to do with it because their price has risen so much and there's such a mania in the crypto market. I'm guessing some investors are just, you know, they're selling their silver perhaps to buy Bitcoin. Again, I think that's a very sad thing because I think we're getting near to that fateful day in which we do have that shortage and, and the game is up. And it feels as though that silver squeeze is so close. It's a very, very sad deal if people are not able to hang in there till that day.
It really is. It wouldn't surprise me if you're right that some of them are converting their profits to cryptos. And I don't know. To me, it seems like a pretty risky time to be doing that. As we've discussed before, I really see them as a speculative investment, and so I think that's risky. When we're kind of on the edge of a recession here,
Yes.
and the people who can hold out. I imagine that they're going to be diamond hands at that point, and they're going to be selling off, little by little, and just waiting to see how much they can squeeze out of that investment they've made all these years.
I want to tell you something personal.
Okay, you bet.
A couple of nights ago, I had this dream in which I was just looking at the price of silver. In my dream, I was looking at the price of silver and suddenly it started jumping. It started surging, on and on and on. It didn't stop going up like this vertical line. And of course, it was just a dream, and dreams can sometimes be meaningless. But I do think there is, something prophetic about this specific dream because the market is built in such a way in which if the price ever jumps, it's going to start feeding on itself. This is what is constantly on my mind that I look at people around me and I look at this speculative mindset that has taken over people and the way they chase every cryptocurrency, every meme coin, every asset that rises, they start chasing it.
Yeah,
Yes,
while it's pumping
yes. So the
is when they
public,
all want to pile in.
so the
Yeah.
public has been conditioned to chase those assets in order to try to, protect itself against inflation or make a quick buck.
Uh-huh.
If it happens to silver, even just a little bit, I think it's going to start feeding upon itself. Like if silver gets a bit of attention, just a bit of attention, then people
Yep.
start noticing that, hey, supply is limited. Hey, we've had deficits for a number of years. Hey, the price is probably cheap from an historical viewpoint. So if it starts running, I can't see what is going to stop it, what is going to be able to stop it, especially if the banks are no longer able to supply the market. If they lose control over that mechanism,
Right. And it's a small market too.
yes, it's a tiny market. If they
Yeah,
lose control over that price suppression mechanism, then it has the potential to do things, to put Bitcoin to shame.
right. Absolutely. And looking back in the past in 1930, when the US imposed tariffs on about 20,000 imported goods, it ended up sparking a trade war. Many countries did retaliate with tariffs of their own, and one of those countries was Canada. Canada imposed tariffs on 16 US products that accounted for about 30% of the US exports to Canada. Now, in this time period back then, the US was on a gold standard, so the price was fixed. But this time we are not. And if a trade war starts and it ends up triggering inflation, I could see it affecting the prices of the metals.
Well, we don't exactly know what will be the trigger, but history teaches us that inflation always ends when gold and silver, the price of gold and silver rises to catch up with the money supply. It's true that in prior cases of inflation, we didn't have such a financialized system, economy. and we didn't have Bitcoin as this kind of liquidity sink. But I don't think that fundamentally this has changed. I think that the final destination of all that money printing, all that liquidity which is sloshing around the system, the final destination is always commodities, and particularly gold and silver. I'm still quite confident that it's going to happen eventually. The only question is when.
That makes sense. And I feel like they're starting to lose control of gold a little bit.
Yes, but it's still extremely undervalued in my view. You know, just for it to reach 3,000, which looks like a huge milestone. But by doing so, it will only be setting its foot on the starting line, you know, in the race towards revaluing itself compared to the money supply. Now, just to realize how much liquidity is sloshing around there, just look at the markets. Just look at the way in which Bitcoin can jump just overnight, or all those meme coins can jump overnight, or the
Sure.
stock market, you know, those tech
Hmm.
stocks. Just recently they had a big down day, but you know, they can just as quickly set new all-time highs because there's so much what we call hot money slushing around there. Yes, it's money that has been printed. It's in the hands of very wealthy individuals who are constantly speculating with it, trying to increase their wealth. They look at it as casino chips. Unlike you and
Right.
I, who are very careful with our money because we don't have a lot of money, they
We
can,
can't be reckless with it. Yeah.
yeah, they can afford to just put a few millions on some meme coin because they think there's a good chance it's going to pop. And if they lose those millions, so be it. It
They'll be all
doesn't,
right. Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't change their personal finance to a huge degree. So it's what we call hot money. It's here right now and it can be gone in a few minutes. And the amount of liquidity which flows around, it injects so much volatility and craziness into the market that it is evident that it will have to be resolved somehow. And I think the way for it to resolve is by revaluing all the prices of commodities and also the cost of labor. People's salaries will have to rise accordingly. And then when the prices of commodities, the prices of, you know, the stuff you need, of food, of fuel rises, then this is the only thing that can restrain that speculative fervor because people are going to say, okay, my grocery bill is going up tremendously. My
Hmm.
yeah, fuel, the price of fuel is going up. Perhaps I shouldn't speculate as much as I'm doing right now. Perhaps I should be a little more conservative with my money. This is what needs to happen. This is what usually happens during times of inflation. We need the prices of commodities to catch up with the expansion of the money supply. This is how inflation ends.
So what are your thoughts on gold and silver going forward? Do you think that we could potentially see a big correction in either metal, in the price going up in the net within the next few years? Or, I mean, if you had to guess.
As I told you, I think many times, I'm not going to try and guess the price of gold and silver short term because if we do get a recession, we could see a temporary decline even in the prices of the metals. I don't think it's justified, but it's just the way the market works. But long term, people should focus on the long term because it's very difficult. It's almost impossible to tell what's going to happen in short term. There's so much volatility in the market. And as we get to the final stages of this bubble, this volatility is only going to increase. The only thing that we can say with confidence is that long term, the prices of the metals should rise in order to compensate, in order to account for all the money printing that took place during the past decade. Yeah, it takes many, many years for the market to do this kind of accounting. And it's even more difficult now that we have Bitcoin and other assets who are masquerading as safe haven assets. So instead of having the money flow directly from, let's say, from assets into commodities the way it used to happen, there's like a stop in the middle. It's like a dam. Yeah, like Bitcoin is has
Right.
a dam on the river of dollars.
And
And
they go out of their way to convince themselves that it's a safe haven asset. It's really kind of crazy because I think that there's really two times when people are investing in gold and silver. One is if they've made a lot of money off a speculative asset. It's smart, or maybe if they just sold something expensive like a house. But it's smart if you made a bunch of money off crypto, then you take it and park it in gold and silver to protect that wealth. And then there's dollar cost average stackers. But there's this idea today that some of these cryptos are almost as good as the precious metals, and it's kind of crazy.
I think it's an illusion. I think if you truly study what is Bitcoin, I'm not talking about its technical aspects, which sometimes can confuse you. Think about the essence of it. It's working as a ledger. It's not truly an asset because it has no industrial applications. I mean, like if you can't sell your Bitcoin to someone else, there's nothing else you can do with it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't construct a solar
No.
panel or electronic circuit with it. So it's useless on its own. It's only a ledger which allows people who participate in it to say, okay, I've put into this system and now I want to take some energy out of it. But that, of
Right.
course, means that someone else needs to be on the other side of
To
that
buy that from you.
transaction
Yep.
and pay you those dollars that you want to take out of that system.
And then they're going
Okay.
to be hoping to resell that to someone else in the future.
The price of Bitcoin only relies on its popularity. There is
Sure.
no person in the world who is forced to buy Bitcoin for any reason. Nobody's life, nobody's industry, nobody's product rely on consuming Bitcoin.
Right. Nobody really has to have it.
They
This is
only buy it
completely
because they
optional.
want to, not because they have to.
Yes.
And that sounds like a small thing. It isn't. It's a huge, huge thing because gold and silver have that industrial user out there who has to get them no matter what happens. If the price rises, it continues to buy. If the price falls,
They're
even
still
more,
buying.
even more so. If the
Yep.
price falls, it will step into the market and take advantage of that
That lower
decline in the
price.
price.
Yep.
Yeah.
You cut down the cost of the phone you're making or whatever it is you're making.
Yeah, as far as the industrial consumer is concerned, that's a good thing if the price falls. So you have this constant demand that gives a floor to the price, which no crypto asset has, and no crypto asset will ever have. And this is why gold and silver are a lot more stable. The price is stable. The industrial demand tends to stabilize the price, reduce volatility, and also why they have been around for so many thousands of years because this industrial demand just keeps them going. Also grants legitimacy to using them as monetary assets.
Absolutely. They have a long history that you can trust, not nearly as much downside potential as cryptos. It's a whole nother animal.
As I was saying earlier, I see Bitcoin and other crypto assets right now acting as some kind of a dam. If you think about the flow of dollars in the system as a huge river, it slows down the flow of liquidity towards their final destination, which is commodities, always has been, always will be. Because eventually we all need to eat and we all need, a roof above our heads. So each and every one of us needs commodities. We all consume
Right.
commodities. And we are all trying to make more money so we can consume more commodities. That's always the final destination of money is to consume.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, that is always what it ends up boiling down to.
So if there is an imbalance in the system and you've had a huge increase in the supply of dollars, eventually always means that you need to see the prices of commodities rising accordingly for the market to find equilibrium. Now, this is a principle which is, It's everlasting. Doesn't matter the policy of the Fed or the policy of the federal government. Doesn't matter. This principle will remain, I think, forever. Thank you for listening to the Silver Hermit podcast. If you like this content, please donate in the link which appears in the description below. Please subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends and family. Hit the bell icon to be notified whenever I release a new video. Remember, I'm not a licensed financial advisor. This video is intended for general informational purposes only and should not be regarded as investment advice. Before taking any investment decision, please consult with a professional financial advisor who may assess your personal investment objectives and needs.